doing the hand-drawn?
Yes,
Or
exactly.
Niklas? Yes. Yes.
I will do
Okay.
it, and then Niklas will assist me.
You have rights to share screen.
Mm-hmm.
Niklas as well.
All right.
And we remind participants that this is a kind of a more interactive session. You can ask questions at the end of every kind of chapter, I would say, not all the time, and interrupt the speaker. And Niklas is going to answer questions while Hans-Peter is doing the. Okay, I think you can
Exactly.
start,
Yeah.
Hans-Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Jutta. So we decided to basically continue with the pace we had yesterday. Better setup for everybody than the day before yesterday. So as you probably know by now, by the lectures today, it's about radiobiology. And so we will now basically also cover this aspect of. Yesterday we covered uncertainties, and today will be about radiobiology, also with an emphasis on carbon ions. I will share my screen. So please go to the Indico page, and under today's Thursday, there's again a handout for today, which is somehow magically linked now also to the Tuesday handout. But anyway, so please open this PDF, and then you can download it, and then you will find all the steps that we're going through in the next 1.5 to 2 hours. All right, so let me move all of this aside. First of all, start MATLAB. As always, for those who have a MATLAB installation, you can just go to the command prompt and enter MATLAB, so, MATLAB GUI, and enter to execute the command. For those who have a standalone version on Mac or Windows, please go to the location or where you installed the application to, and just double click on the icon to launch MATLAB and MATLAB. So yeah, and then hopefully the MATLAB screen will appear. And now I also have to open the PDF. Yes. And for the first exercise, so we will start easy and slow. First of all, we load again the TG119 Phantom. So I navigate to my Phantoms folder and select the TG119 Phantom, and then it should show up. Right. We went through this Phantom already a couple of times. So by now you should know that this yellow region is our target region, and here we have an organ at risk at a very delicate position. This target basically shaped around our critical organ at risk. And for now, I would also ask you to enable the plan visualization button so that you can see the beam angles that you currently selected. And so in the first exercise, we will actually start with protons, just to again, to also have then a reference plan that we can compare with. So for now, you select as radiation mode protons. And for the gantry angles, you can select 0, 45, and 315. Also, you have to add the respective couch angle. And actually, before we start, you can also treat the handout like as a minimum requirement that you have to fulfill. Please feel free to add more objectives, more complex geometries, or certain beam configurations. So this is totally up to you. What I've put in the handout or in the workflow document is, so to say, the bare minimum. For those of you who have very limited computational power, you can also increase the spot spacing by entering, I don't know, 6 millimeters or 7 millimeter here. As of now, I just leave it here at 5, but maybe for some of you, when we later on move over to carbon ions, 5 might be too computationally intense, just as a small heads up. And what's also important is for the type of the optimization, we switch it to none, which actually means this will be a physical optimization. But I will go to that now. Also well, and now once we have that, we can click Calc Influence Matrix. So now Matrat computes for every pencil beam from every beam direction, the dose deposition for unit fluence. All right, and then we adapt a little bit the objectives and constraints. And here I simply said, well, let's deliver 60 gray to the target, because maybe then later on it will be a little bit easier to analyze the plans, since the fractional dose level will then exactly be 2 gray. And therefore, I set it here to 60. I will leave the other parameters as they are, but yeah, feel free to also maybe adapt the penalties if you, for instance, want to spare the core organ here a little bit more, then yeah, you might want to increase the penalty or reduce the dose level here from 25, I don't know, to 20. But for now, I will just keep everything as it is, and we'll click on the optimize button to trigger the inverse plan optimization. And now we'll just wait until the optimization finished. So the first example is just to, again, get a little bit exposed to Matrat, and then to start with the simplest things, which is, in this case, biological treatment planning for protons, which means we use a RBE of 1.1. That's what currently being used in the clinics. Although there are like a lot of discussions going on between a variable RBE for protons versus a constant RBE. The optimization finished, and the treatment plan appears. So yeah, now we can see that we have the very high homogeneous dose in our target, and yeah, almost 0 dose in our organs at risk. That's located here on the distal part of our SRBP. And now, so very simple, you can save to GUI and enter a name, proton 3 beam none. And the none indicates simply we did not consider any biology here. So this is simply a physical optimization where we optimize the physical dose. And this is also why you see here on the label, I mean, it's really, really small written here, but it displays the physical dose in gray, and there is no biology yet involved. And now let's also have a quick look at the DVH, which looks in this 3-beam proton setup quite nice, I would say. And let's again have a look at some quality metric. I mainly look at the D95 for the outer target. This is the target here in yellow, and D95 is 1.96 gray. 1.96 gray. All right, and now since in the clinics we typically don't use a physical dose optimization for protons, one has to consider the RBE. So what we do here now is we simply recalculate the dose, and we can easily do this if we now switch in the plan. In the plan view, we can switch the type of optimization to constant RBE. And this is like very simplistic here for protons. It simply means that we now recalculate the dose with an RBE of 1.1. Let me quickly check if I have saved the plan. Yes, I did that. So now I changed the type and I perform a recalculation. So this is now, I assume, a constant RBE of 1.1 throughout the whole radiation field, which means at the end, I simply scale up the physical dose by 10%. That's all it is for protons right now. But this, yeah, based on a lot of empirical studies, this RBE of 1.1 was derived, and the scientific community agreed on that value, and this is also what's being used as of now in the clinics. All right, and now we see an updated dose. Here we can go to RBE times dose in the display option. And now we can again have a look at the DVH, which now puts out a T95 of 2.16 gram. So this is higher, right? So this means simply that what we did right now, we did a physical dose optimization for 2 gray, and then we scaled up the dose, assuming a constant RBE of 1.1. So just to highlight this very simple phenomena for the RBE for protons. Now, I would suggest to move on now to carbon ions. So what we do now is we switch the radiation mode now to carbons. And I would like to define the type of optimization. I would put it also to none for the time being, simply to run a physical dose optimization for carbon ions. I will leave now the settings as they are, and I will also not save this result that I just created, which is, well, for protons, was simply scaling up the RBE by 1.1. So now comes the more important stuff. So we switch the radiation mode to carbon. We have 3 beams. And for the type of optimization, we set it to none. And now we can calculate the dose influence matrix. So this first part, again, was simply just to show you that for protons, it's straightforward. Constant RBE of 1.1 is also from a treatment planning perspective very easy for us to implement, because we simply have to scale up the physical dose during optimization by a constant factor. And we now go to carbon ions, then it becomes more complex. So what's happening now in the background is we are computing the physical dose influence matrix, as well as this alpha matrix, this radio sensitivity alpha influence matrix, so to say, and also a beta influence matrix. So I just calculated now the dose. Please, it's not updated in the display. And I will quickly switch over to MATLAB. Again, this is just, you can just follow me or just look at my screen. I just wanted to show you that Niklas already explained the different variables that we have here in the background. The CST contains our structure set. The CT is basically our image, the CT image. The DIJ is now, this is the structure we are now interested in, which contains the dose influence matrices. Now I will double click on that. And as of now, yeah, I only see the physical dose here as dose influence matrix, yes, because I selected type of optimization as none here. All right, so, and now we click on the optimize button, and now we optimize a carbon ion treatment plan, only looking at the physical dose. And as you know, I was selecting 2 gray per fraction as target dose, as homogeneous target dose. Now for carbon ions, you know, we have the dose tail. So for each pencil beam, we actually now have more voxels for which we have to compute those. And also this means we have a larger DHA matrix, larger in size. And also, this also basically means that the optimization takes a little longer compared to protons, which is mainly contributed to the dose tail. All right, and now it should update the view. But just look at the proton dose distribution, and very soon carbon ion dose distribution should appear. Ah, yeah. All right, so there it is. Took quite some time to display, honestly, but now we see the physical carbon ion dose, and I guess you can directly see immediately what's different now to the proton distribution. So first, we have a dose distal to our target because of the dose tail, and you see also basically these are extensions of the individual beam directions. So there's one beam coming. We will enable the visualized plan geometry. And you can directly see now how, for instance, this dose tail is probably the dose tail from the beam direction coming in here from 45 degrees. You can also have a look at the individual beam doses. So, all right, this is the physical carbon ion dose of beam 1. Looks highly modulated. And now we see, you can also see the carbon ion dose of the second beam direction. And yeah, but you should, if you compare this to the proton treatment plan, then we should have also have now a higher dose in our organ at risk because of the dose tail, and the dose tail is, yeah, it's always there. It cannot be like magically disappear. All right, then I'll switch back to the physical dose. And I guess I still have here in the RBE times dose, this should be the proton dose distribution. So this is basically now the proton dose distribution, and now I'll switch over to the carbon ion dose.
Yeah, Hans-Peter, can I make a quick comment? Because I think I know what just happened, why it took so long to update to the carbon dose. Since we had a proton RBE dose in the memory, basically, you actively need to switch to the physical dose after optimization, so it displays the carbon dose. Because the RBE weighted dose will not be computed for the carbon, so it will stick to the old dose. So you really need to click refresh and change to the physical dose.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, for all of those who just were running the optimization for carbons, then please click the refresh button. And let's also directly save this result. And I call this result now carbon physopt. So to indicate that we only did optimization on the physical dose. So there is no biology involved right now. And we'll save this. So this is not what's being done in the clinic. This is now I want to show you the impact of considering the biology now. So how does the biological effective dose looks like for this physical carbon ion treatment plan? That's what I would like to show you now. And to do so, we again have to change the type of optimization. And here we can select LEM for effect. Yeah, you can select LEM for effect, or alternatively, you can also select LEM for underscore RBE times dose. At the end, it's almost identical. LEM effect, you basically optimize the biological effect, and after optimization, you convert it back to the RBE weighted dose. And if you select in the drop-down menu this option, then it will directly optimize in the RBE weighted dose. But as of now, I just keep it on LEM4 underscore effect. and I will check if I have saved. Yes, I saved this result. And now I will click on the recalc button. And now it will compute for this given fluence that we see here on the right, the biological effective dose. And I hope by now you know that these biological effects for carbon ions have a strong non-linearity. I'm expecting now also a strongly non-constant or strongly inhomogeneous biological effective dose, or RBE weighted dose. Here in Macrot we called it RBE weighted dose, RBE times dose, so to say. And Albana in her talk before was always referring to BED. But yeah, in the end, it's the same thing.
Sometimes there's like a little bit the BED RBE weighted dose. Sometimes they are used interchangeably, but there's also often something that is referred to as BEDs for this fractionless approximation to biological dose, which basically takes the fraction out of the dose in a sense. So that should not be confused with each other. So that's often what you see in the context of normal tissue complication models or something like this.
Yeah.
So be always careful when you read about BED in the carbon sense. So you don't confuse an RBE weighted dose that gives you the photon dose in a fraction with a dose normalized to 0 fractions in a sense, like, or basically that took the fraction out of the equation in a sense. Yes, that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you for the comment. So now we are still looking at the physical carbon ion dose, and in the background now the computation of the RBE weighted dose finished. And if we now click on the display option, you can immediately see that we now have a couple of options here to select. And most interesting here for now is RBE times dose. This is, I'll click on, and now I see the RBE weighted dose. And as expected, it's inhomogeneous. It's not like, it doesn't have a constant dose level of 2 gray anymore. Whereas in fact, here at the distal edges of my target, I have doses up to 5 gray biologically weighted. And yeah, so this would mean I highly overdose the tumor, and also I overdose basically the healthy tissue here, because the entrance dose here in the, let's say for the beam angle coming from 0, if I look at this turquoise color, then this already corresponds to 2 gray. So this is now the RBE weighted dose for a treatment plan that was purely optimized on the physical dose. And maybe we can also have a look at the RBE, which we can also now select, which is simply the ratio between the RBE weighted dose and the dose. And here we can see that, I mean, the color scale is not optimal, I have to admit, but yeah, we have a very high RBE in these low dose regions. But since the dose is so low, it's not so important. But for instance, what you see here is in the core structure, where we have the dose tail, we still have a relatively high RBE, also therefore a non-negligible dose. But in general, you see that if you basically walk through this whole treatment beam, that from the entrance towards the end of your beam, if you walk along the beam, so to speak, then the RBE increases with depth. And if you multiply this with the physical dose, with this constant physical dose that we previously optimized, then you end up with the RBE weighted dose. And in this case, since we did not do a biological optimization yet. We were simply recalculating the biological effective dose for a physically optimized treatment plan. So this is something we have to keep in mind now. So we did a physical optimization and then basically computed the biological effective dose using the local effect model. And now we look at the biological effective dose. But we did not do a biological optimization. It's a bit confusing, but it's very important that you know this difference. We only did, we calculated the biological dose, but we did not do yet a biological dose optimization, which is what we do next. So therefore, I want
Hans-Peter, yeah. Maybe we should also remind the participants to export some dose slices for this exercise to a PNG for their, let's say, results document. So maybe the RBE weighted dose and the physical dose or something like this.
Yes, exactly. That's a good idea. So. Yes.
And then we could give like, I guess, a few minutes, and you can also show the alpha, beta, and effect distributions, and that would be, I think, also nice.
Yeah, but I guess it's better to show it then for the biologically optimized plan.
Yeah.
But indeed, you're very right. We should save here the RBE weighted dose. And also the physical dose. And then we could also have a look at the DBHs. So this is basically the extreme case that would never do anybody in the clinics, basically neglecting the biology. And this is now the physical dose. Yeah. So now the for RBE weighted dose, the biologically effective dose is now much higher than 2 gray. And this is basically what you can see here. The D95 of our target is now at. But anyway, I guess you see what I like to show you, that here in the DVH, this was the one of protons, this was the one. So yeah, if we do not consider biology, we do a physical optimization, we highly overdose the tumor and also the healthy tissue. So therefore, we now do a biological optimization, and you basically can leave all the settings as they are. I will just save this. We'll call it carbon recalc by dose. We'll save this. And now we'll do a proper biological treatment planning workflow. And therefore, we simply leave all the settings as they are. And now we basically have selected the type of optimization as LEM4 effect. And now we click the calc influence button to compute now the influence matrix for the physical dose, but now also for the alpha and beta parameter to then later on optimize the biological effect. And if this now takes a little bit too long on your machine, then you can also think of basically increasing the pixel width here from, I don't know, 5 to 6 or 7. Once this calculation is finished, I will just quickly move over to my basically to MATLAB, and will show you those influence structures. You don't have to follow me, it's enough if you just look at my screen. I guess you can already see that the computation now takes longer than before, where we were just considering the physical dose. Right, if we now look back in the DHA structure, then here we now have the physical dose influence, and also there are two more structures, which is called alpha dose and square root beta dose. And if I'll relate this back to my talk, then these are the matrices that you see here. So we have the physical dose influence matrix, an alpha influence matrix, and now a square root beta influence matrix. And this is exactly what you see here. They all have the same size. The physical dose simply contains for each pencil beam, the physical dose for unit fluence, and M alpha dose contains the linear component of the biological effect, so to say. And the beta dose, the squared component of the biological effect. And these are the quantities then that are actually being used for treatment planning. Okay, now let's switch back to the graphical user interface. So now we have computed the dose, and now we run an optimization and calculate now the biological effective dose. And you don't have to change anything in your optimization parameters, because now Makrot knows that you are running a LEM4 effect optimization, and all the numbers you provide here, the reference dose values, are now being treated as biological effective dose values. And you also see that now the optimization is slower, because not only we have more voxels to consider because of the dose tail in carbon ions, we have basically now two more matrices that we have to process during each step in the optimization. And this is why it takes longer. So therefore, yeah, carbon ion treatment planning is computationally more demanding than just a physical dose optimization. All right. And now we finished already. That was quick. And this is our treatment plan now. This is now a carbon ion treatment plan biologically optimized using LEM4. And the optimization itself was carried out on this intermediate quantity, the biological effect, and then converted back to the RBE weighted dose. And I would say we directly save this result now, and then we perform some screenshots, and we'll have a deep analysis of what we just did. So I will save this now to the graphical user interface and I will call it Carbon BioOpt. So now, just to comparison, we also have here now Carbon BioOpt, and here we have the recalc stuff. So I will switch back to the result where we did not do a biological optimization, just to show you one more time visually the difference. So here we have this high dose of almost 5 gray. Now I'll switch back to the current result, which is this. And we can also now have a look at the DBH, which should in principle be even better than the one of protons because of the, at least for the entrance dose, because of carbon ions and their increased effectiveness, the ratio of the dose you give to the entrance to your target, this becomes enlarged. So there's a better trade-off. You have a larger, also called therapeutic window of carbon ions. So let's look at the D95 here. This looks good. Also the DBH for the outer target looks quite steep. But yeah, we also have some dose here in the core. So I don't know, like 20% of the core receives a dose greater than 0.8 gray. And now it's up to the treatment planner. If this dose is based on your experience and some guidelines, if this is too high, then you would have to put a higher constraint or a higher penalty on the core objective to further push this line down the 0.5 dose, for instance. Okay, and now we can also have a look at the different quantities. So first and foremost, I think we can have a look at the effect, because that's what's being optimized, and it's simply a downscaled version of the RBE weighted dose. This is basically the biological effect, which is dimensionless and has here a number of, I think, 0.4 in the target, and that's what's being optimized. And then after the optimization finished, you take the square root and add some factors, which are basically the reference photon parameters, and convert it back to RBE weighted dose. Here's again the RBE weighted dose. What's more interesting now is the physical dose, because from the previous example, you know that if we apply a homogeneous physical carbon ion dose, then we have these non-linearities, and we highly overdose the tumor, especially in the distal part. So biological optimization takes now care of this problem, and what it does is the deeper you shoot in, it downregulates the physical dose to compensate the increased biological effectiveness. And this is something we should see right now. So we should see a higher physical dose on the proximal side, and then it should fall off for deeper tissue sections on the target. And this is actually what we see here. So the biological optimization is, since it knows my carbon ions are becoming more effective, and the deeper they penetrate, so I will downregulate the physical dose to compensate for that effect, such that my RBE weighted dose fits the prescription, which was in this case 3 gray RBE weighted. So here we have the physical dose. Now let's have again look at the RBE, or maybe now I think this is also worth an image. Should also take a screenshot here. This is because this is now the physical dose of a biologically optimized treatment plan. Maybe we should have a small break, and before I go into the other distributions. But it's really important here to understand now the differences, what we just did. So before, we were not doing a biological optimization. We had a physical plan optimization using carbon ions, and then we simply applied the biological model and computed the biological effective dose. And this resulted in a very high dose in our tumor. Basically, this means when we do not consider these biological effects and simply optimize the physical dose, we highly overdose our tumor. And therefore, what we just did in the last step, we were running a biological optimization to compensate this non-linear biological effects. And this means that in order to get a homogeneous biological dose, the optimizer downregulates the physical dose such that you end up with a homogeneous RBE weighted dose. I hope this is not too confusing. Are there a lot of questions in the chat?
So, no, the questions are very nice, very interesting. So it's not too many questions. I think an interesting question that also comes down to looking at the other distributions, and we already looked at effect, was a little bit of confusion about what the biological optimization actually optimizes. Basically, it was about the linear quadratic model. And so maybe to tell it to everybody, so what you really optimize based on the linear quadratic model. So the linear quadratic model, I think it was already introduced today, basically works with two parameters to determine how cell or how basically they model how cells survive exposure to radiation. And there you have the alpha parameter and the beta parameter. And actually, exactly what's in this exponent, if you take the minus sign out of it, is what we in MATLAB call the effect that we optimize. So what you usually is reported for tissues now is for this model, the alpha and beta parameters for this tissue. So basically, but that is usually as a reference radiation, you usually have like photon irradiation or cobalt-60 irradiation, like with the photons coming from a cobalt-60 source. So this doesn't help you with the carbon ions, because the carbon ions change their alpha and beta parameters depending on their depth. So this is like depends on LET and other radiation quality measures, let's say, of the beam. So what the biological optimization basically needs two models. It needs one model, and that's the LEM model here, that basically translates this dependence of the alpha beta parameters to the photons. So basically you get the alpha and beta parameters that Hans-Peter in the slides just really marked that correspond kind of or transition to the photon world. So basically then instead of having for the tissue itself one alpha or beta parameter set, you basically have a depth dependent alpha beta parameters in the voxel. So in each voxel in the patient, you have a different alpha and different beta depending on the carbon depth and so on. This is the LEM part of the model. And then you can apply the biological model like the LQM. And if you relate these parameters with each other, you basically can also define this RBE weighted dose, which basically gives you the dose at which the survival is the same. So it gives you basically, it relates both survival curves for the carbons and the ions with their different alpha beta parameters to each other. And that's what is going on. And you can also, with the new alpha beta parameters for the carbons, directly optimize instead of doing this conversion always on the fly during optimization. Just change your prescriptions to effect prescriptions internally and optimize on them, which makes the optimization process a little bit easier, I would say. So that's what's going on.
Exactly. And so we have the biological effect optimization implemented, but also the RBE weighted dose optimization implemented. And in the very end, these are very similar things, because if you look at this equation, the biological effect is what's being marked here in green. And there is only, you take the square root, and before you basically apply these constants, so the addition of some photon reference parameters, and this is a very computationally cheap operation. And this does not cost much during the optimization. So it does not, from performance point of view, it does not really matter if you optimize the biological effect, and then at the very end, after iteration 200, when you're done, convert it back to the RBE weighted dose, or you directly optimize on the RBE weighted dose, which is the complete expression that you see here.
Yes. Okay, so they are like maybe the only thing that is annoying when you do RBE weighted dose is like computing the gradient of for the optimizer. That's a little bit, you need to handle the square root and so on. So basically you need to compute the gradient, but that's just math. You need to exercise in a little bit of linear algebra and so on. But it's really not a big deal. So it's kind of interchangeably, I would say. So we have two more questions that we can answer. The first, and I think that's already a good question, it shows that the people are following and also having the same idea. So can we set a specific tissue?
Yes,
we will get to that.
Yeah.
MATLAB basically always assumes at the beginning, and that is also something that need to be carefully chosen usually. But if you start with nothing, it will choose an alpha beta ratio of 2. and that you can also change, and we will look at this later. So the other question is if MATRAT, okay, do you want to add something?
One comment. We also assume per default that we have the same biological tissue everywhere. So we select one alpha beta ratio, and per default, we assume this alpha beta ratio for the entire patient for all structures. We have the freedom later on, I will show you that, to individually select other alpha beta ratios for certain tissues. But in the clinic, typically, the gold standard is to assume the same alpha beta ratio for the entire patient.
Yeah. Okay, and the final question for now is if there are options to calculate TCP and NTCP. In MATRAT directly, there are no models for this included. One of the reasons is that there are other good tools that can do this, like I mentioned again, SIR, how is it called, has some NTCP and TCP models, I think. Another open source platform that has this is Regui, which also has a set of open source platforms, of open source NTCP models. So that's quite nice. But actually, we will include some models just because we are working also on using NTCP models directly in the optimization interchangeably for ions and photons. So there might may come in the future, but at the moment, just choose one of these other excellent tools, open source tools, and export your dose there and try out the NTCP models there.
Was there another question, or shall we wait 1 or 2 minutes before I continue?
No, I think optimization questions are done now.
If you run a carbon ion optimization, typically your the fan of your notebook can get very loud.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if you have shown this. Do we have time, or what? How much is it still going on? Like how? It's only the liver case. I have to check the.
No, I have a box phantom case, and then last but not
Okay.
least the liver case. But...
Yes. Okay. Because what you always have to consider biological optimization, at least as it is implemented in MATRAT, does not evaluate the model on the fly during every optimization run, during every iteration. So what it does is that it creates these pre-computed matrices similar to this dose influence matrix. You now have an alpha dose matrix and a square root beta dose matrix. And these matrices are used to basically not have to evaluate the model, because if the model, like LEM4, for example, is very complex and you cannot directly evaluate it easily during optimization, you need a way around this, and this is how it is handled in MATRAT. So basically you have now two matrices in the background.
Exactly, and these matrices can now effectively be used during optimization. So we can re-evaluate the biological effect after changing the weight vector, or after changing the fluence, basically. And this is basically what I presented earlier before, that we have implemented this analytical approximation in the beam mixing model. So we don't effectively call LEM4 when we perform a biological optimization. This biological base data was created upfront one time and can then be used for every patient for treatment planning, because the dose calculation at the end is carried out in water equivalent length. But this is also very technical then.
There's one question now also coming that I do not understand. Do the optimization is at the end a feedback to beam control for better control of the physical dose? I don't really know what you want to ask here, so maybe try to reformulate. And I think Hans-Peter, you can continue, and I will continue to answer questions in the chat.
All right. So let's have again at the different quantities that we see now here. Starting with the simplest, again, that's the physical dose of carbon ions that we have to deliver to then have a biologically effective dose of 2 gray. And this really means that we have to apply the physical dose that you see here to induce the same effect as if you would apply a photon dose of 2 gray. So, and yeah, because of the nature that the RB is increasing for increasing depth, we have this phenomena that we have a high physical dose on the proximal side of our tumor, and then it drops off towards the end to account for the increased effectiveness. And this is also something we should see now here. If we again look at the RBE distribution, then we see that the RBE is now, we can also use this cursor here, this data cursor. I don't know if you have introduced it yet, but you can click here on the data cursor and then click here in the treatment plan. And then it should highlight of every distribution that's available the respective value. And now let's have a look here at the RBE. And the RBE is 2.7 over here. If you click here in the beam entrance, it's 1.9. And here, let's say over the very end of our target with an RBE of 4. And even beyond, you might reach even higher values. But also, especially here, you have a very, very low physical dose, and then the product, the RBE rated dose is smaller. All right, I will close the data cursor here. But yeah, so this is the RBE distribution. And if you multiply this distribution with this physical dose, then you get the RBE weighted dose. And now, as I've said before, we can also look at the effect distribution. And furthermore, so the effect distribution is in this case, of course, also homogeneous because yeah, it's just an intermediate quantity that we use for optimization. And here we can even look at the 2 components of our linear quadratic model. So here we have also an alpha distribution that we can investigate. And we see that yeah, it increases also towards the distal edge, and also there is the beta distribution. Which looks like this. And now you can compute essentially alpha times dose plus beta times dose squared, and then you have the biological effect. Then you kind of end up with this distribution. And then if I follow this equation that I gave you here, then basically before I show you this, then I have to say, Niklas was also saying it before, that the current tissue refers to a radiosensitivity in the photon world of an alpha beta ratio of 2. So the alpha x and the beta x is 0.1 and 0.05. These are the reference parameter. This is the reference tissue, so to say, that has been where the radiosensitivity has been quantified in the photon world, but not in the carbon ion world, for which we need the LEM model to do that. But basically, if we now have this distribution, then we have this quantity up here. I hope you can see it. I will enlarge it one more time. Then we simply divide it by beta x, which is one single value, 0.05 in this case. Alpha x is 0.1. 2 times beta x, square it, and then we take the square root and minus this term. So it's a simple nonlinear conversion. And then you end up with the RBE weighted dose. And the RBE weighted dose is simply what you see when you. This is then how everything comes together. All right. Then, yeah, if you haven't taken any screenshot, then please do so. I guess now we can move on to task number 2. Or is there any question from the audience related to this case? Otherwise, I will continue. So we move on to task number 2. Now you already did successfully a carbon ion treatment plan. Now we basically play a little bit with the tissues. So therefore, we select a artificial phantom, the box phantom. So you click on load data, and then you navigate to your phantoms folder and load the box phantom. All right, and I will leave the pixel width at 5. The gantry angle, I will now just select one beam angle. Here the beam geometries is not so important for this example, as you will later on see. So we'll simply use one beam angle coming from the top. We'll visualize my beam. Okay, this is one beam coming now from the top, from gantry angle 0. It's fine. As radiation mode, I select carbon. And as machine generic, as always, please leave that as it is. And for the type of optimization, you're free to choose. You can do LEM4 RBE weighted dose or LEM4 _ effect. For those of you who are very fast, you can also try both of them and compare these two optimization results. For those of you who want to follow me, just select LEM4 effect, and then I also add higher penalty. I select 60 gray for 30 fractions, which means I optimize for a fractional dose of 2 gray, RBE weighted. And now I will just calculate the dose influence matrices. So again, the physical dose influence matrix, the alpha dose influence matrix, and the square root beta dose influence matrix, in order to then being able to effectively evaluate the biological effect for different weights. All right. Now the dose calculation has finished for unit fluences, and now let's optimize this treatment plan for carbon ions on this very simple water box phantom. And what's now important to know is in this example that this refers now to, so the default tissue we use for treatment planning is alpha beta ratio of 2 from the photo world. So alpha x is 0.1 and beta x is 0.05, which then gives you an alpha beta ratio in the photon world of 2. And this is the reference, the reference tissue. we're using for biological optimization. Or basically we say all our water box or all our tissue has this specific radiosensitivity in the photon world. And now we have optimized the carbon ion treatment plan biologically. So now we see the RBE weighted dose again, which is 2 Ray. And yes, of course, you also see the dose tail, right? Can also move back to, for instance, the physical dose, then we should see a similar behavior, that we have a high physical dose at the proximal part and then it falls off. And yes, indeed, this is the case. Yeah, and as I've said before, because the carbon ions, they fragment into lighter ions, we have this dose tail. You can also, with the data cursor, for instance, click here in the dose tail and check how large the dose actually is. And if we do so, then we see the physical dose here is almost 0.1 Gray. And the RBE weighted dose, considering the higher RBE here, the RBE is 0. The RBE weighted dose is 0.2. And now you can also have a look at the RBE itself. We'll close this data cursor. Yes, it's here. So it also, you can see it increases. It peaks over here and then falls off a bit. But the highest RBE is basically at the stopping location of the primary carbon ions. This is also the region where you have the highest LET. And now let's have a look back at the RBE weighted dose. And here, let's take a screenshot. Now, actually, I guess it's even better if you go to the physical dose and take a screenshot. And I will call this simply alpha beta ratio of 2, physical dose. All right, and I will also save this result now. So I click on the Save to GUI button, and I will give it a name, and I will use carbon 1 beam and AB2 to indicate I was now assuming an alpha beta ratio of 2 during this biological optimization. And what we're now doing is we switch our tissue type. So before, or in this optimization, we were now assuming that our tissue is characterized by an alpha beta ratio of 2 in the photon world, because of we know this type of tumor very good, and according to a couple of cell experiments we know that the radiosensitivity can be described by the linear quadratic model with an alpha beta ratio of 2 very well. So, and now for whatever reason, for instance, I now have a new tumor that has a different radiosensitivity, and let's basically model this here also in Matrat. Therefore, you have to click on this Set Tissue button here. And in this Set Tissue button, you can now see what we were actually using all the time, which was for the body structure, an alpha x of 0.1 and beta x of 0.02. And this corresponds to an alpha beta ratio of 2 for both structures that we have now in this object. And now we can switch. So here's a little drop-down menu for each structure, and now we can essentially switch to the second option, which is an alpha x of 0.5 and a beta x of 0.05. So the alpha beta ratio for this tissue type is 10 in the photon world. Because we know now this tissue or this tumor that we want to treat right now is better described with this radiosensitivity parameters. So we save and close. And actually, one would have to run a new local effect model simulation to derive the new parameters for every fragment, for every energy. But we already did this upfront once and have also tabulated these these depth-dependent dose-averaged alpha and beta curves for each initial beam energy. So we can directly start treatment planning for this new tissue type, so to say. And now we have to click again on Calc Influence Matrix. So now we calculate new, especially new alpha and beta influence matrices because the biology changed, and so the LEM prediction changed. And now we click on Optimize. So now we run a biological optimization for this simplistic water phantom case, but we now assume a different biology. And this is now super interesting to see what's happening in the background, because what I expect now is that since we optimize for an RBE weighted dose of 2, I will get an RBE weighted dose of 2 gray in my target. And let's see if this is really happening. Okay, optimization finished, and voila. I'm already looking at the RBE weighted dose, and yeah, I can also see now, if I relate this reddish color here to this color bar, that I have 2 gray. So the treatment plan looks very good. I can also confirm this in my DBH. I can also confirm this when looking at the DBH. It's also good. It's really optimized for the 2 gray per fraction that I entered here. But what's the difference now? So in the background, we were switching the tissue and we're changing basically the biology. But the RBE weighted dose is the same, right? So the optimizer took care of that. But now the interesting part is when we look at the physical dose. So now this is the physical dose, which is now much higher than before. Before we had a physical dose that peaked around, I think, 0.9 gray. So it was below 1 gray. And right now, the physical dose is much higher in this case, right? So if I change the tissue type, what was happening here is that it led effectively to a lower RBE, because now the optimizer needs to apply a higher physical dose to achieve the same RBE weighted dose of 2 gray. Let's see if it didn't store the previous result, right? Maybe I have to run it again. Or I will just bring up the picture that I just took before. So please also save this, this image. Take a screenshot, and this is now, I call it AB10 physical dose. And I will just open the images. Just give me 1 second. All right. So I hope you can see it now on my screen, that on the left side, you see now the physical dose of biological optimization while using a tissue that's being characterized with an alpha beta ratio of 2. And on the right side, you see now a biological optimization with carbon ions using or assuming a tissue that's being characterized with an alpha beta ratio of 10. Here now the physical dose is higher. And this is somewhat counterintuitive, because if we look at the photon world, so this is now, I hope it's not getting too confusing, but this is something I wanted to show you. This is this slide. So in the photon world, the alpha beta ratio of 10 actually means it's more sensitive. I need less dose compared to an alpha beta ratio of 2 to induce the same effect. But the local effect model really operates at very high doses. When you look at the particle track and you basically relate the local effect at this particle track to that of photons, then you have very, very high doses of tenths of thousands of gray. And then the situation now changes here, because the alpha beta, the curve of the alpha beta ratio of 2 quickly bends down, whereas at very high doses at 10,000 gray, the red dash curve basically crosses the other line, and this relation switches. So in the photon world, the alpha beta ratio of 10 translates to a more radiosensitive tissue, while this is, as I've just showed you, not the case for carbon ions. And what I would like to highlight with this is so that it really matters that you know these radiobiological parameters of your tumor that you're treating. If they are different, you directly see that the carbon ion dose is like vastly different between these two optimizations. I was just assuming a different tissue type. And like in absolute terms, the carbon ion dose is half a gray larger in the second case. All right. Is there a question in the chat?
Yes, I think there are some issues because biological optimization is so heavy on computational load. So this is kind of an experiment here because it really doubles all the effort in a sense, and even more than doubles the computational effort, and it might get slow. And we had, I think, also one Mudword standalone crash and then not open, which I guess is due to some temporary files that won't go away. So maybe we should just do a break before going to the liver case. So people are also able to catch up.
Sounds good.
To some extent, and yes. Yeah, if you sometimes cannot reproduce the results, sometimes just like one setting is off. Might already happen. You started off with one setting that was a little bit different, and then the results become different. So don't worry too much about this.
Yeah, exactly. More important is that you understand the concepts that we want to transport.
Yeah. The computations might be really heavy here. For example, for this reason, we cannot show you robust optimization because that puts even stronger workstations sometimes to their limits. And yeah, so if some of you have it like it runs very slow, we are sorry for that. But we hope that then following Hans Peter's explanations still helps you to understand how this impacts your dose and the planning process and what parameters you have to set. there was one really interesting question that we may explain for everybody. Again, it's about kind of, I think many questions were about like choosing these parameters and how you deal with it. Tissues can be heterogeneous and so on. And basically the answer to this is that these alpha beta values are first of all very difficult to obtain and measure exactly and or model in a way. So when you go to a publication and look at like that reports alpha beta ratios, there's usually a very large uncertainty associated with them. And some other experts can correct me if I'm wrong, that who are more close to clinical practice, but also in clinical practice, dealing with these tissue types is like something that is not easy. So in principle, then you have like a state-of-the-art publication saying like this has this alpha beta ratio and this has this alpha beta ratio, and you have some measurement there. And so what I know is that basically you need to be very careful to pin down, like I said, and then you rather go with a more conservative choice on the alpha beta ratios that may not allow you to exploit the full tissue difference or basically exploit the best distribution of carbon ions that you would get if you would know the alpha beta ratios exactly. But you need to be quite conservative when choosing them and be on the rather safe than sorry in a sense. So like we are basically kind of more far away of then basically computing distributions of those that then maximize on a very local level your carbon ion distribution, because the uncertainty that underlies these parameters is just still way too large. If we would know them perfectly and we could pin down in a voxel what tissue exactly is in there and what alpha beta parameters does it have, then you could create, if this would be exact, you could create extremely personalized or tissue optimized carbon ion distributions that factor in the biological impact. This would also be true for photon doses or proton doses in the end, because then you could also optimize how to distribute photons given the alpha beta values, how to fractionate and so on. But yeah, the uncertainty is large, and you need to be conservative, and you don't want to make wrong assumptions in a sense, and overfit to a problem that is not even real. So one case I mention very often, and which is like basically my prime example to illustrate how you could think about using like heterogeneity in this and different alpha tissue types, is the glioblastoma thing. There's for example trials of boosting the clinical tumor volume or the gross tumor volume that you see when you take a glioblastoma image, but you know there is this large region where you have partly infiltrated healthy tissue where you do not want to destroy all the healthy tissue in it. And so you boost, for example, with carbons the gross tumor that you see, but then you use photons to fractionate better on the mixed tissue, because you know there's some mixture of tumor tissue, cancerous tissue, and healthy tissue. So you need to find a better balance. So there are ways to exploit this alpha betas, but like that's really kind of like heterogeneity in these tissues and infiltration. That's really like you need a lot of knowledge about the exact distribution and about the tissue types, about the alpha beta parameters that you just don't have. So there's quite some magic behind that in a sense, and you do not want to get involved with magic. You want to stick with what you can safely say is okay.
Yeah. But yeah, what you were pointing out before is also a really crucial point. So from a treatment planning perspective, we can do fancy things and basically assign alpha beta ratio to each voxel individually. But the question is, how do you really get these values? How do you get radiosensitivity parameters upfront to the treatment? This is like really a not so trivial task, and therefore people took a very conservative approach, and we know also from clinical trials that the current assumptions that they do work. All right. So let's wait, I don't know, 2 or 3 more minutes, and then it's 3:30. We could start with the last task. Maybe meanwhile, I will save this result to a graphical user interface. We'll simply call it effect-based and save. Now we'll go over to the RBE times dose optimization. And we'll optimize again. The result will be pretty similar because or basically there will be a small difference coming in because of the ratio between the prescription you have made to the target and your organ at risk is different in the RBE dose domain because you have the square root when you convert the effect to the RBE weighted dose. So you have like, there are non-linearities in the trade-off that might occur. So, but they are very small, but yeah, numerically it's not the same, the two results. So now we have the RBE weighted dose of an RBE weighted dose optimization. And now I'll switch over to the effect-based result. Let's see if we spot some differences. Now, switch back. I don't know. Yeah, there are like small differences, but they negligible. All right, then I would suggest to move on to the next task. And for this, we load our beloved liver patient. We again navigate to our phantoms folder and now load the liver patient. And we open it. And there it is. And also for the time being, I just leave, of course, the radiation mode to carbon ions and also the type of optimization. I will leave it to RBE times dose. Pixel width is 5 mm. If your computer is again slow or was slow during the optimizations previously, then just increase this to 6 or 7 millimeters. Your treatment plan will look slightly different, but the computation is much faster. And I will, what else did I want to do? I'll change the gantry angle to 330 degrees. I will only use a single beam now. And yeah, I will calculate my dose influence matrices. So I will running our dose calculation. You can also call it biological dose calculation. So for this example, it's important to also keep the previous example in mind. So when we changed our tissue from alpha-beta ratio from 2 to 10, then we needed to apply a higher physical dose to end up also with a 2 gray RBE weighted dose. So we needed a higher physical dose. And
Hans-Peter, the standard setting when you change to the liver patient is alpha beta 2 everywhere, right?
Yes. You can also check this if you click here on set tissue. Then you see that for every structure now the alpha beta ratio, and per default it's set to 2. But for now, yeah, I will just leave it at 2. And in my PTV, I changed the prescription again to 60 gray and will then run an optimization. Niklas and I, we also decided to use this liver case and not the prostate case, because the prostate case is one of the most demanding cases. It's large, and maybe you also saw it when we used the proton setup with the 2 beams. If you go to carbon ions, then because of the additional influence matrices, you have to compute your memory requirement triples.
Yeah, the prostate is too deep in the patient. So basically you have large ranges, your matrices get bigger. The target volume is quite big, so everything gets bigger. So taking 1 beam on the liver patient hopefully works for you all.
Yeah, again, I think also here you can now see that the optimization takes longer. All right, this is our treatment plan. For now, I will just disable the contours, just that you have a better look. In this case, it's really very hard to get a homogeneous dose in the tumor, because there are so many heterogeneities also here along the beam path. You have bone, air, and also the liver case itself.
Also, if you have chosen a larger pixel width because of computational times, you will have like a much more heterogeneous dose probably.
Exactly, like if you have selected a larger pixel width, then the situation will become even worse for you. But for now it's okay. So we can again take a screenshot.
So maybe also a comment on the pixel width here, while Hans-Peter saves the result, and you are hopefully doing it as well. So actually 5 millimeters for carbon ions might already be a stretch, because from the physical interactions, basically, since carbon ions are so heavy, they scatter like not as far out of the beam path as protons do during traversing the tissue. So a single carbon pencil beam can be actually very sharp, and depending on how your beam is focused, you might need to go down so to a denser grid. So for example, 3 millimeters or something like this. And for carbon ions, you usually also want to exploit somehow this sharp gradient and not basically completely make your beam wide then through focusing to choose less spots. Like the sharp lateral fall off of carbons is also a feature in a sense. So usually you have to work with denser spot grids. So you see, carbon ions are problematic for the computational load. First, you have a denser grid in general. Then you have like the tail, which creates additional dose points. Then you have dosimetric, like you have the dosimetry, the biological dosimetry, that you need this multiple matrices and so on. And if you try a 3 millimeters pixel width and your user interface crashes, then probably your computer is not, your PC is not equipped to handle the 3 millimeters. So doing 3 millimeters can, that this 3 millimeter grid basically quadratically is quadratically proportional to the number of beamlets, like inverse quadratic. So if you reduce, you basically, your spot grid will in both dimensions get denser, and so your number of beamlets explodes. So that this gets very large, and then the optimization will get super slow, the dose calculation will get super slow, but in the clinic you need it. The commercial systems are so thoroughly optimized, they come on a powerful workstation that you can somehow still live with it. But if you work on your home PC, then this might become critical. And because there was the question, can it damage my computer? Just to answer this, like usually if a program eats up too much memory, since we do not write anything to the disk in particular, it will just basically make it super slow, and maybe the application will crash, but there should be no lasting damage to your computer, because we do not write on your hard drive and like basically make it completely full or stuff like this. So this program will not maybe your application will crash or it will freeze, but it shouldn't damage anything.
So I again switched in the display option over to the physical dose, and now I'm looking at the physical dose, and I can also observe something similar in this case, that the physical dose basically peaks proximal to my SOBP and then falls off to compensate the increased effectiveness. And let's switch back to the RBE weighted dose, and let's have a look at the DBH. All right, here it comes. We'll enlarge it. And now I will again search for the CTV, which is the turquoise line here. I was using a prescription of 2 gray. Yes, this is matched somehow. Now I'm looking for the D95 again of the CTV. I have a mean dose of 2 gray, rather low standard deviation. The maximum dose is 2.25 gray, and D95 is 1.91 gray. I'll note that down and keep that in mind. But I will also leave this window open. And also feel free to save this image as a screenshot to upload this then later. All right, and now we also save this result. And I simply save it as alpha beta ratio of 2. Click on save. All right, now it should, let's check the display option. Yes, RBE weighted dose is here. Perfect. And now what we do is we switch the tissue type of our PTV. So therefore we go to the set tissue button, and now we have this huge list, and we only go now to the PTV and change here the tissue type to an alpha beta ratio of 10. This is just for illustration purposes. For instance, if the radiobiology that you originally assumed is now for whatever reason different during treatment because of the oxygenation supply changed. All right, so we now changed our tissue, and we don't perform our optimization. What we do now is we perform a recalculation. So we again now recompute the RBE weighted dose from the fluences we just optimized, but we assume for the tumor now a different biology. And to do so, we click on the recal. So now we're modeling a different tissue type simply for the given fluences that we previously optimized for an alpha beta ratio of 2. And again, in the previous example, we we needed, basically in the previous example, when we changed the alpha beta ratio from 2 to 10, we observed that we need a higher physical dose to achieve the same RBE weighted dose. And this is now kind of, we do it the other way around. So now I look at the RBE weighted dose, and I see that I am now underdosing my tumor, because the radiation became less effective. Before, when we switched to to an alpha beta ratio of 10, we needed to apply more physical dose, which means we have a reduction in RBE to achieve a homogeneous dose of 2 gray. And here in this case now, we did it the other way around. We optimized a treatment plan for an alpha beta ratio of 2, and we're recalculating now the biological effective dose for a different tissue type, just in the tumor. And yeah, this exercise is basically to basically illustrate how these different tissue types impact the RBE weighted dose, how drastic this impact is on the RBE weighted dose, and how important it is that one accurately knows these radiosensitivity parameters. And please also here take a screenshot. And I will now save this as liver AB10 in PTV. And I will again plot the DVH and the quality indicators. And now we should also see in the DVH, when we look at the turquoise line, that because we changed our reference tissue, the radiation became less effective, and we now heavily underdose our CTV. And I'll just put up the previous DVH. Yeah. And I hope you can see it, that we now have this drastic change in the DVH. And this should also be visible in the D95. So here we have 1.95. And for this case, where we now assume the different tissue, different tumor tissue, we have a D95 of 1.2. So yeah, at the end, you can optimize everything the way you want it to be, but you really need to have good biological based data that makes sense to come up with a reasonable good treatment plan. Are there any questions from the chat, Niklas?
There was a question which is maybe quite interesting, again, about the choice of alpha beta ratio that you might to choose, if this is basically something that is decided somewhere else, or if this is part of the, let's say, planner, or there's a choice of the planner, or let's say the protocol. So in principle, choosing the right alpha beta ratios here is not very different than, for example, how it always works in photon therapy, where you might think about different prescriptions. So for example, might want to boost the region of the prostate, because you know there's a different I don't know, some more radio resistant part of the tumor there, or something like this. But in the photon world, this is like, it's often more handled with the prescription level itself. So you think about a different prescription, and this is related to the underlying tissue properties. When you plan for particles, this is a little bit, this alpha beta ratio has like more like a direct hands-on, plays more a direct hands-on role, and you need to think about it, let's say, more directly than you would be used to this from the photon world, for example. But in principle, the alpha beta values that are reported on the one hand are the ones that that are basically reported for the photons usually. You have like the photon alpha betas, and then on top comes the model uncertainty of the carbon um, um, model that creates the carbon alpha beta values based on the photon alpha beta values and the beam properties.
Exactly.
So what you select here is basically the alpha betas from the photon world, and then the model will translate it to carbon alpha beta. So there's two sources of uncertainty. First, choosing the alpha betas or choosing the right model or designing the right model. So that's like the two things. In the photon planning world, you usually do not basically these differences in tissue are handled with, let's say, prescription levels more often. So basically also when you change the fractionation, you adapt the prescription. So you do not really think about this as terms of an effect-based optimization or something like this. Or like here in particles where it's the RBE weighted dose where you try to mimic photons because you know all these processes from the photon world. So if you know a fractionation level and some alpha beta values and the prescription, you try to do an RBE weighted dose and then you basically relate to what you know from the photon world. So that's somehow maybe not a satisfying explanation, but maybe that was clear enough and understandable.
Right. That was a good question. Yeah, I hope you could all follow. If not, feel also free to use Matrat beyond this hands-on sessions and report bugs on GitHub.
But also something, because there was a comment earlier. I do not. I like everything is so slow. I skip the social events because I need to do everything in Madrid. These hands-on sessions are basically, it's not there that you or there for you that you really recreate everything we do. So if you do not manage to get through the full task because your computer is super slow, and you maybe only have done the first task or something like this, you can just like also do this and attach the first results and say my computer was too slow to follow up with the next one. So you do not have to then skip the social events or something like this. It's really about you seeing and feeling, if possible, how this works to work with these quantities and these differences and these features and issues that you have to deal with when you plan with ions and protons. So that's kind of what this is about. It's not about you recreating everything that we do and then having like the exact same results. So it's more about getting the feel for it. So if you basically have a super slow computer and you manage to do task one, that's also okay. So I don't have to sit until 3 in the morning or something like this, or given the time difference, some other time even to finish everything. So that's what that's I think shouldn't be like an exercise that you have to exactly fulfill and create the best results. It should getting an idea about how it feels to work with this. Okay, this also relates to when we have to finish the task. I don't want to say something wrong if basically I think we discussed it, but it's also okay to upload the stuff tomorrow or for the end or at the end of the school.
Actually, we said till Monday 24.
Okay, yes.
No?
Yeah.
So that there is a weekend also if somebody wants to let the computer running. Yeah.
I guess that's about it. I've added one optional thing is you could now also combine this with setup uncertainties and uncheck the ISO center box and shift the patient in addition. But this is just something that is optionally.
Just some suggestion if you want to do something, combine some of the knowledge.
Exactly, and this would then go into the direction of combining so to say, biological uncertainties where you misinterpreted your tissue and you have a setup shift, which would of course be a very, or would be some sort of a worst case scenario. But to see what's happening with the dose distribution is still quite interesting. All right, but then I think, yeah, we're slowly reaching the end of the hands-on sessions. Maybe a quick recap. On the first day, we did a quite extensive session on how to install Matplotlib as a standalone or how to use it together with MATLAB. On the second day, Niklas continued presenting some basics about photon and proton treatment planning. And yesterday, we had a look at uncertainties. And today we covered the aspect of biological treatment planning. And yeah, the recordings of these lectures will also then be uploaded to Indico. You watch them in case you're interested.
Yes, as you said, Hans-Peter, the morning session is already, recordings and presentations are already in Indigo, and tonight we will upload this afternoon recordings. Now, if you have finished, just to remind the participants that there is the evaluation form and the polls actually that you are completing, they are helping us a lot. We can have a coffee break, but I wanted to see, maybe we start like at 4:20, the session to discuss the results, because we have quite a lot and we have not enough time to discuss the results. So the ones that they will be able to connect at 4:20, we can start discussing some results. What do you think about it?